Amy Brooks opened her eyes slowly. Her head hurt badly and everything around her looked blurry. She tried to move her hands, but they would not listen to her. Something was wrong. This was not her ship. The last thing she remembered was flying, her small scout ship near a distant star system. She was looking for signs of alien activity just like she did every week. It was supposed to be a safe mission. Earth Defense Corps had sent her out alone because the area was considered empty space. But something had been waiting for her. Now she was lying on a cold metal floor in a room she had never seen before. The walls were made of some kind of dark material that seemed to move slightly when she looked at it. Strange lights blinked on and off in patterns she could not understand. Amy sat up carefully. Her blue uniform was torn in several places, and she had cuts on her arms. She looked around the small room and realized she was in some kind of cell. There were no windows, just solid walls on all sides. One wall had what looked like a door, but there was no handle on her side. She stood up and walked to the door. It was smooth and warm to the touch. When she pushed against it, nothing happened. She was trapped. Fear started to grow in her chest, but Amy pushed it down. She had been trained for situations like this. The first rule was to stay calm and think clearly. Panic would only make things worse. She began to examine every part of her cell. The floor was made of the same dark material as the walls. It was completely smooth, with no cracks or holes. The ceiling was higher than she could reach, and it glowed with a soft light that came from nowhere she could see. Amy had been in her cell for what felt like hours when she heard sounds from outside. Footsteps, but not human footsteps. These sounded different, like someone walking on more than two legs. The sounds got closer and closer until they stopped right outside her door. The door slid open without warning. The creature that walked into her cell was like nothing Amy had ever seen before. It was taller than any human, maybe 8 feet high. Its body was covered in a hard shell that looked like the outside of a beetle, but it was black and shiny. It had 4 arms and 2 legs, and its head was long and narrow with big eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Behind the first creature, 2 more of the same kind entered her cell. They all wore clothing that looked like it was made from metal, and they carried devices that Amy guessed were weapons. The first creature made sounds that were not words. They were clicks and whistles that hurt Amy's ears. One of the other creatures held up a small device, and suddenly Amy could understand what they were saying. "The specimen is awake," the first creature said. Its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Take it to the examination room." Amy did not move. "I am Lieutenant Commander Amy Brooks of the Earth Defense Corps," she said in a strong voice. "I demand to know why you have taken me prisoner." The creatures looked at each other and made more clicking sounds. The first one spoke again. "It speaks. Good. This will make the research more interesting." The creature stepped closer to Amy. "You are now property of the Kithura Science Division. You will be used for experiments that will help us understand your species." Amy felt her blood turn cold. "What kind of experiments?" "We study how different species fight and survive when faced with death," the creature explained, as if it was talking about the weather. "Your species is new to us. We want to see what makes humans different from the other creatures we have collected." Before Amy could ask more questions, one of the other creatures pointed its weapon at her. The weapon made a high sound, and Amy felt her muscles stop working. She could not move, but she could still see and hear everything around her. The creatures picked her up and carried her out of the cell. As they moved through the hallways of what Amy now knew was a spaceship, she saw other cells. Through small windows in the doors, she could see other prisoners. There was a creature that looked like it was made of crystal, glowing with its own light. In another cell, she saw something that looked like a giant lizard walking on 2 legs. Another cell held something that was hard to look at directly, like it was made of moving gas or smoke. The creatures carrying Amy turned a corner and entered a large room. This room was different from the hallways. It was white and clean, with bright lights everywhere. Tables and strange machines filled the space, and the air smelled like chemicals. The creatures put Amy on a table in the center of the room. Slowly, she began to feel control return to her muscles. She could move her fingers, then her hands, then her arms. A larger creature entered the room. This one wore different clothing that had symbols on it. Amy guessed this was their leader or scientist. "I am High Examiner Vextal," the large creature said through the translation device. "I lead the research on this vessel. You are the first human we have captured." Amy sat up on the table. "Why are you doing this? We never did anything to harm your people." Vextal made a sound that might have been laughter. "Harm? We do not capture specimens because they have harmed us. We capture them to learn about them. Knowledge is more valuable than revenge. What are you going to do to me? You will be placed in situations designed to test your survival abilities. We will see how you react to danger, how you fight, how you think when death is near. The data we collect will tell us whether humans should be considered a threat to Kithra interests." Amy felt anger building inside her chest. "And if you decide we are a threat? Then we will know how to deal with your species when we find your homeworld," Vextal said simply. The words hit Amy like a punch to the stomach. These creatures had found Earth. They knew where her home was, where her family and friends lived. Everything she cared about was in danger. But Amy Brooks had not become a lieutenant commander by giving up when things looked bad. She had been trained to think clearly under pressure, to find ways to win even when winning seemed impossible. She looked around the room, studying every detail she could see. She watched how the creatures moved, how they held their weapons, how they talked to each other. Every piece of information might be useful later. "When do these tests begin?" she asked. Vextal's eyes seemed to shine brighter. "Tomorrow. Rest. Well, human, it may be the last peaceful sleep you ever have." Amy woke up when cold water hit her face. 2 Kithera guards stood over her, holding what looked like buckets. She was no longer in the white examination room. This place was different. She was lying on dirt and sand. The air smelled like blood and fear. Above her head, a dome of clear material stretched high into the air. Through it, she could see stars she did not recognize. Around the edges of the large space, she saw the other prisoners she had glimpsed in their cells. The crystal creature sat in one corner, its body glowing dim blue. The giant lizard stood near a wall, its yellow eyes watching everything. The gas-like being floated near the ceiling, moving like smoke in the wind. There were others too. A creature that looked like a cross between a bird and a person. Something with too many arms and legs that looked like a spider the size of a human. All of them looked scared. Amy stood up and brushed dirt from her torn uniform. One of the Kithara guards spoke through a translator device that hung from the ceiling. "The first trial begins now. You will face the hunters of our homeworld. Survive until the sun sets, and you will live another day. Die and your species will be marked as weak." The guards left through a door that sealed behind them. Amy heard mechanical sounds, and then other doors around the arena began to open. What came out made her heart beat faster. The first creature was the size of a large dog, but it moved on 6 legs and had claws as long as knives. Its skin was black and wet, and acid dripped from its mouth onto the sand, making it smoke and bubble. Behind it came 2 more of the same kind. From another door came something that looked like a wolf, but it was see-through. Amy could watch it move, but when she tried to focus on it directly, her eyes seemed to slide away. It could walk through. The wall, like the wall, was not there at all. The largest creature that entered the arena made Amy take a step back. It was twice as tall as she was, with arms that reached almost to the ground. Its skin was gray and rough like stone, and electricity sparked between its fingers. When it looked at her, she felt her hair stand up. The other prisoners scattered to different parts of the arena, the crystal being tried to hide behind a pile of rocks. The lizard creature roared and stood ready to fight, but Amy could see its hands shaking. The spider-like thing climbed up the wall as high as it could go. Amy did not run. Instead, she looked around the arena carefully. There were rocks scattered everywhere, pieces of metal that looked like they came from old weapons, and holes in the ground that might have been left from previous fights. The first hunter came straight at her. Its claws reached for her chest, but Amy was already moving. She had trained for years in hand-to-hand combat, and her body moved without her having to think about it. She rolled to the side and grabbed a sharp piece of metal from the ground. Sato. Hunter turned and came at her again. This time Amy was ready. When it jumped, she rolled under it and sliced the metal across its soft belly. Black blood spilled onto the sand and the creature screamed, but the acid in its blood began to eat through the metal weapon. Amy dropped it quickly before it could burn her hands. The hunter was hurt, but not dead, and now she had no weapon. The see-through wolf was moving toward the crystal being. Amy watched as it walked right through a wall and appeared behind the glowing creature. The crystal being did not even see it coming. Amy made a choice. She picked up a rock and threw it as hard as she could at the wolf creature. The rock passed right through it, but the wolf turned to look at her. Good. Now it was focused on her instead of the crystal being. The wolf came toward her, moving through rocks and metal pieces like they were not there. Amy remembered something from her training. Her instructor had taught her that every enemy had a weakness even if it was hard to find. She waited until the wolf was almost close enough to touch her. Then she jumped backward into one of the holes in the ground. The wolf followed her, but something interesting happened. When it tried to walk through the dirt at the bottom of the hole, it could not. It was solid again. Amy grabbed a handful of dirt and threw it at the wolf. Where the dirt hit, the creature became visible and solid. She could hurt it now. The fight was quick. The wolf was dangerous when it could move through things, but when it was solid, it was just another animal. Amy used a broken piece of pipe to strike it in the head until it stopped moving. When she climbed out of the hole, she saw that the other prisoners were not doing as well. The lizard creature was fighting two of the acid-spitting hunters, but it was losing. Black acid covered its arms and it was making sounds of pain. The large electric creature was walking slowly toward the spider-like being on the wall. Every time it pointed at the spider, lightning jumped from its fingers. The spider was moving as fast as it could, but the wall was only so big. Amy looked around for something she could use. Near the center of the arena, she saw a pile of metal, pieces that looked like they might have been part of a machine. She ran toward them. The electric creature saw her moving and turned toward her. Lightning shot from its hands, but Amy dove behind the metal pile just in time. The lightning hit the metal and spread across it, but it did not reach her. Amy began to understand something about this creature. It used electricity as a weapon, but electricity needed a path to travel. She started moving pieces of metal, creating a line from where the creature stood to a pool of water she had noticed near one wall. The creature fired lightning at her again. This time, Amy was ready. She held up a long piece of metal like a spear and let the lightning hit it. The electricity traveled down the metal, through the line she had built and into the water. The electric creature was standing in the same water. Its own lightning traveled back to it through the water. The creature shook and fell down. It was not dead, but it was not able to fight anymore. Amy turned to help the lizard creature. It was still fighting the acid hunters, but it was getting weaker. She picked up rocks and began throwing them at the hunters from behind. The rocks did not hurt them much, but they made the hunters confused about which direction to attack. While the hunters were distracted, the lizard creature was able to grab one of them. Its powerful jaws bit down on the hunter's neck. The creature died quickly. The last hunter turned to run away, but Amy was ready for it. She had noticed that these creatures were fast moving forward, but slow when turning. She threw a rock to one side of it, and when it turned to look, she threw another rock that hit it in the head. The hunter fell down and did not get up. Amy looked around the arena. All the creatures that had been sent to kill them were now dead or unable to fight. The other prisoners were still alive, though some were hurt. She walked over to the crystal being, who was glowing brighter now with what looked like relief. "Are you okay?" she asked. The crystal being made musical sounds, and the translator in the ceiling turned them into words. "You saved me. Why?" Amy helped the injured lizard creature sit down against a wall. "Because we are stronger together than apart," she said. Through the clear dome above them, Amy could see Cathara scientists watching everything. They were making notes and talking to each other quickly. She had the feeling that something about this fight had surprised them. The sun was setting through the dome. They had survived the first trial, but Amy knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, and the Kithara would make them harder. But she was not afraid anymore. She had learned something important today. These creatures had captured prisoners from many different species, but they had never dealt with a human before. They did not understand that humans did not just fight to survive. Humans fought to win. Amy woke up in a different place again. This time she was in a room with the other prisoners. They were all sitting on simple beds made of metal. The crystal being, who had told her his name was Zephyr, was glowing softly in the dim light. The lizard creature, called Thane, was cleaning his wounds with water from a small bowl. The spider-like being hung from the ceiling in one corner. Its name was too hard for Amy to say, so she called it Web. The gas creature floated near the window, and Amy had learned to call it Mist because of how it moved. "They are planning something worse for us," Thane said, his voice deep and rough. "I can smell their fear scent in the air. We surprised them yesterday." Amy nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. The way the Kithara scientists had watched them fight was different from what she expected. They looked worried instead of just curious. Zephyr's light pulsed in patterns as he spoke. "In my world, we have stories about creatures like the Kithara. They think all intelligence works the same way theirs does. When they meet something different, they do not understand it." "What do you mean?" Amy asked. "They expected us to act like animals when we were afraid. Run, hide, fight without thinking. But you did something they did not expect. You made plans. You helped others. They do not know what to do with that." Before Amy could respond, the door opened. High Examiner Vexital entered with several guards. The large Kithara looked at Amy with his mirror-like eyes. "The specimen shows unusual behavior," Vexital said. "Today we will test something different. We will see if humans can make the hard choices that survival requires." The guards led them through new hallways to a place Amy had not seen before. It was another arena, but this one was different. Instead of one big space, it was divided into sections by walls and barriers. It looked like a maze. "This is a test of choice," Vexital announced through the speakers. "The human will be placed in the center. The other specimens will be divided into two groups and placed at opposite ends of the maze. Both groups will be in danger. The human can save one group or the other, but not both. We will see what choice the specimen makes when forced to choose who lives and who dies." Amy felt cold fear in her stomach, but not for herself. She looked at the other prisoners. They had become her responsibility when she decided to help them yesterday. How the Kithara were trying to make her choose which of her friends would die. The guards separated them. Zephyr and Webb were taken to one side of the maze. Thane and Mist were taken to the other side. Amy was placed in the center, in a room with two doors. Through windows in the walls, she could see both groups. Above each group, a large container hung from the ceiling. One contained water, the other contained fire. Vexital's voice came through the speakers again. "In 5 minutes, both containers will open. The water will drown the first group. The fire will burn the second group. There are 2 buttons in your room, human. You can press one button to stop one container, but pressing it will make the other container open immediately. Choose now." Amy looked at both buttons. One was blue, one was red. Through the windows, she could see her friends waiting. Zephyr's light was flickering with fear. Thane was trying to break through the walls with his claws, but they were too strong. Webb was climbing the walls looking for escape. Mist was pressing against the window, trying to get her attention. But Amy was not looking at the buttons anymore. She was looking at everything else in the room. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. The pipes that led to the containers above her friends. The electrical wires that powered the lights. Her father had been an engineer before he joined the military. He had taught Amy how machines worked, how to find the weak points in any system. Every machine had them. Amy found what she was looking for. In one corner of the room, a panel was slightly loose. Behind it, she could see pipes and wires. She pulled the panel open and looked inside. The water and fire systems were connected to the same main pipe. If she could block that pipe, neither container would be able to open. But she needed something to plug it with. Amy tore strips of cloth from her uniform and rolled them into tight balls. She stuffed them into the pipe as hard as she could. Then she looked for the electrical system that controlled the containers. She found the main wire that powered both systems. If she cut it, both containers would stop working, but she had nothing sharp enough to cut through the thick wire. Amy looked around the room again. The buttons. They were connected to the electrical system too. If she could make them short-circuit, it might overload the whole system. She pressed both buttons at the same time. Sparks flew from the button panel. The lights in the room flickered and went out. Through the windows, she could see that the lights in the other rooms had gone out too. But the containers were still there, and Amy could hear water starting to flow. Her cloth plugs were not enough. She needed something bigger. Amy looked down at her boots. They were military issue, made of thick rubber and metal. She pulled them off and stuffed them into the pipe as hard as she could. The water sound stopped. Amy ran to the doors leading to both groups. They were locked, but the electrical system was damaged now. She found the manual release handles and pulled them both. The doors opened. Amy ran to the first room and helped Zephyr and Webb out. Then she ran to the second room and helped Thane, and missed. All of her friends were safe. Through the speakers, she could hear Cathara voices talking quickly in their clicking language. They sounded upset and confused. Vextal's voice came through the speakers, but now he sounded different. Less confident. The human has altered the test parameters. This was not anticipated. Amy stood in the center of the maze with her friends around her. She looked up at the cameras she knew were watching them. "You wanted to see how humans make choices," she said loudly. "Here is your answer. We do not choose who lives and who dies when we can find a way to save everyone." Later, when they were back in their holding room, Thane looked at Amy with something like respect in his yellow eyes. "How did you know how to break their machine?" he asked. "I studied it," Amy said simply. "Every system has weak points. You just have to look for them." Zephyr's light pulsed thoughtfully. "The Cathara do not think like that. They see a problem and accept the choices they are given. They do not imagine new choices." Amy nodded. "That is their weakness. They think intelligence means following rules and accepting limits. But humans do not accept limits. We find ways around them." Webb made clicking sounds from the ceiling that the translator turned into words. "What will they do now? You have broken their test." Amy looked toward the door where she knew the Cathara were watching and listening. "They will try harder tests. They will try to break us in other ways. But each time they try, I will learn more about how they think, how their systems work, how to beat them." She sat down on her metal bed and started tearing more strips from her uniform. "And I will teach all of you what I learn, because when we get out of here, we will need to work together." "When we get out?" Mist asked, its gaseous form swirling with what might have been hope. Amy smiled, and for the first time since she had been captured, it was a real smile. "Not if. When. Because that is another thing about humans. We do not just survive. We find ways to win." In the observation room above them, High Examiner Vextal was looking at data screens with growing concern. The human specimen was not behaving, according to any of their models. Worse, it was changing the behavior of the other prisoners too. They were supposed to be test subjects. But somehow, they were becoming something else. They were becoming an army. Amy had been counting days by watching the lights in their room. It had been 12 days since her capture, 12 days of tests that she had turned into lessons for herself and the other prisoners. The Cathara were getting more desperate with each failed experiment. Today felt different. The guards who brought their food moved faster than usual. Their clicking language sounded more urgent. High Examiner Vextal had not appeared for 3 days. Amy was teaching Webb how to tie knots when the door burst open. More guards than usual entered the room. Behind them came a Cathara she had never seen before. This one was bigger than the others, with scars across its shell and weapons built into its arms. "I am War Commander Sekrath," the new Cathara announced. "High Examiner Vextal has failed to break the human specimen. I will use different methods." Amy stood up slowly. She could feel the change in the air. Whatever was coming would be worse than the tests they had faced before. "Bring the other specimens," Sekrath ordered the guards. The guards grabbed Zephyr, Thane, Webb, and Mist. Amy tried to move toward them, but more guards pointed their weapons at her. She had to stay still and watch as her friends were dragged away. Sekrath moved close to Amy. His breath smelled like metal and death. "You have been playing games with our scientists, making them look foolish. This ends now." "What are you going to do?" Amy asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "We are going to hurt your friends until you break. Then we will see what humans are really made of." Amy felt something cold and sharp grow in her chest. It was not fear. It was something much more dangerous. The guards forced Amy to follow them to a new room. This one was different from all the others. It was white and clean like the examination room, but it had chairs with straps and machines with sharp tools. It was a place designed for causing pain. Her friends were already strapped into the chairs. Zephyr's light was dim with fear. Thane was pulling against his restraints, but they were too strong. Webb was making high-pitched sounds of distress. Mist was trying to make itself smaller, but the chair held its form in place. Sekrath stood in front of Amy. "We will start with the crystal being. Its light makes it easy to see when it is in pain." A Kithra technician moved toward Zephyr with a tool that glowed red-hot. When it touched Zephyr's surface, the crystal being's light flashed bright white. With agony, the sound it made was like glass breaking. "Stop," Amy said, but her voice was quiet. "The human speaks," Sekrath said with satisfaction, "but not loudly enough. Continue." The technician pressed the hot tool against Zephyr again. This time Zephyr's scream was so loud that Amy felt it in her bones. "Stop," Amy said again, but louder this time. Sekrath made sounds that might have been laughter. "Better. But we have only just begun. Move to the lizard creature." Another technician approached Thane with a different tool. This one made an electric buzzing sound. When it touched Thane's scales, his whole body went rigid with pain. His roar filled the room. Amy felt the cold thing in her chest getting bigger. It was spreading through her body like ice water in her veins. "Please," she said, "I will do whatever you want. Just do not hurt them." "Now we are making progress," Sekrath said, "but I think we need to be more convincing. Use the acid on the spider creature." Amy watched as they brought out a container of the same acid she had seen from the hunting creatures. Webb saw it coming and began thrashing in the chair, making terrified clicking sounds. When the acid touched Webb's leg, the smell of burning filled the room. Webb's screams were unlike anything Amy had ever heard. The cold thing inside Amy suddenly became hot, hotter than the sun, hotter than the core of a star. "Stop," Amy said, and this time her voice was different. It was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned to look at her. Even the Kithra technicians stopped what they were doing. Amy was standing very still, but something about her had changed. Her eyes were different. They were the eyes of a predator that had been pretending to be prey. "I said stop," Amy repeated, and now her voice carried something that made even the armed guards take a step back. Sekrath clicked his mandibles together in what Amy now recognized as nervous laughter. "The human is angry. Good. Now we will see. What happens when—" "You have made a mistake," Amy interrupted, and her voice was still quiet, still controlled, but underneath it was something that made the room feel colder. "What mistake is that, specimen?" Amy looked directly at Sekrath, and when their eyes met, the war commander actually took a step backward. "You thought I was trapped in here with you," Amy said. "But you are trapped in here with me." Before anyone could react, Amy moved. Her body flowed like water and struck like lightning. She had been watching the guards for days, learning how they moved, where they kept their weapons, how their equipment worked. The first guard never saw her coming. Amy took his weapon and used it to free herself from the restraints they had put on her. The second guard tried to shoot her, but Amy was already behind him, using him as a shield. The room erupted into chaos. Alarms began blaring. Guards shouted orders in their clicking language. But Amy was no longer the prisoner they thought they knew. She moved through the room like a force of nature. Every movement was precise, deadly, efficient. She did not waste energy on anger or rage. She was something much more frightening than angry. She was calm. Amy freed her friends from their chairs while fighting off guards at the same time. She seemed to know where each attack was coming from before it happened. She turned the Kithara's own weapons against them, used their equipment to trap them, made their strengths into weaknesses. How? Sekrath demanded as he watched his guards fall one by one. How is one small creature doing this? Amy looked at him while helping Zephyr stand up. The crystal being's light was returning to normal now that the pain had stopped. You studied us wrong, Amy said. You thought humans were just another animal that fights when cornered, but you missed the most important thing about us. What is that? Amy smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. We are persistence hunters. We do not give up. We do not stop. And when you hurt the people we protect, we become something that will follow you to the end of the universe to make you pay for it. Sekrath raised his own weapon, but Amy was faster. She had been learning about Kithara anatomy during her captivity, and she knew exactly where to hit him to cause the most damage, without killing him. The war commander fell to the ground, conscious but unable to move. Amy stood over him. Now you are going to help me free every prisoner on this ship, and then you are going to take us home, all of us. Never, Sekrath hissed. Amy knelt down next to him. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that only he could hear it. But what, she said, made his eyes go wide with fear. I have been watching you for 12 days. I know how your ship works, how your people think, how your society is organized. I know your weaknesses better than you know them yourself. You can help me, or I can take this ship apart piece by piece with you still on it. Your choice. Sekrath looked into Amy's eyes and saw something that made him understand why High Examiner Vextal had failed to break this creature. The human had never been broken, because the human had been breaking them instead. I will help, he whispered. Amy stood up and looked at her friends. They were hurt, but they were alive. They were free. Come on, she said to them. We have work to do. As they left the torture room, Thane looked at Amy with new respect and maybe a little fear. What did you say to him? He asked. Amy was checking the weapon she had taken from the guards. I told him the truth, that the Kithara are not the predators in this situation. Then what are they? Amy looked back at the war commander lying helpless on the floor. Prey. Amy led her friends through the corridors of the Kithara ship. She moved like she had been born on this vessel, turning left and right without hesitation. Behind her, Sekrath limped along with his hands bound by his own restraint devices. How? Do you know where you are going? Zephyr asked, his crystal body glowing brighter now that they were free. I have been listening, Amy said simply. Sound travels through metal. For 12 days, I heard footsteps, machinery, voices. I built a map in my mind. They reached a junction where 3 hallways met. Amy stopped and listened carefully. She could hear the clicking sounds of Kithara voices coming from the left hallway. Guard station, she whispered to the others. 12 guards, maybe 15. They will have better weapons than what we took from the torture room. Thane flexed, his claws. We fight them? Amy shook her head. We do not need to fight them. We need to be smarter than them. She turned to Sekrath. Tell me about the ship's ventilation system. The war commander's eyes narrowed. Why would you need to know that? Amy looked at him with the same calm expression that had terrified him in the torture room. Because you are going to help me put all the guards to sleep without hurting them, unless you would prefer I find a more violent solution. Sekrath's shell seemed to grow paler. The ventilation system. There is a control room 2 levels up. If you introduce sleeping gas into the air circulation, it will spread through the whole ship in minutes. Perfect, Amy said. Mist. Can you carry sleeping gas through air vents without being affected by it? The gaseous being swirled thoughtfully. Yes. My body can contain other gases without mixing with them. But where will we find sleeping gas? Amy smiled. We are going to make it. Webb, I need you to gather specific materials. Sekroth is going to tell you exactly what we need and where to find it. For the next hour, Amy orchestrated a plan that used each of her friends' natural abilities. Webb crawled through vents to gather chemicals from the ship's medical bay. Zephyr used his light to read Cathera text that showed the locations of important systems. Thane used his strength to bend metal and create tools they needed. Amy mixed the chemicals using knowledge from her military training. The result was a gas that would make the Cathara sleep deeply, but would not harm them permanently. "Why are you not killing them?" Sekroth asked as he watched Amy work. "Your people are known as warriors. Why show mercy to enemies?" Amy looked up from her work. "Because the strongest thing a warrior can do is choose not to kill when they have the power to do so. That is what separates us from monsters." When the sleeping gas was ready, Mist carried it through the ventilation system. Within 20 minutes, the sounds of Cathera voices throughout the ship began to fade. The guards fell asleep at their posts. Scientists slumped over their computers. Even the ship's command crew fell into peaceful sleep. Amy and her friends moved freely through the ship now. They gathered all the other prisoners from their cells. There were dozens of them, creatures from worlds across the galaxy that Amy had never imagined. In the ship's main data center, Amy found what she was looking for: computer systems that contained all of the Kithera's research, star charts showing the locations of hundreds of worlds, and most importantly, the coordinates for Earth. "Can you understand their computer language?" Zephyr asked. Amy was already working at the main console. "I have been watching them use these systems for days. Their symbols are different from ours, but mathematics and logic work the same way everywhere." She began copying files, downloading everything she could about Cathera technology, their other research ships, their plans for Earth. But she also did something else. She began changing their data. "What are you doing now?" Thane asked. "I am making sure they never threaten Earth again," Amy said. "I am changing their records to show that humans are a protected species under something called the Galactic Preservation Treaty. But there is no such treaty," Webb pointed out. Amy's fingers never stopped moving across the console. "There is now. I am creating it, and I am making it look like it was signed by every major civilization in this part of the galaxy." She worked for another hour, creating false documents, fake treaties, and imaginary laws that would make it illegal for the Cathera to attack Earth or capture humans. She made the documents look old and official, part of a vast galactic legal system that the Cathara would be afraid to challenge. When she was finished, Amy turned to face High Examiner Vextal. The lead scientist had woken up from the sleeping gas and been brought to the data center by some of the freed prisoners. "You have destroyed months of research," Vextal said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "No," Amy replied. "I have given you new research data, the most important discovery your people will ever make." "What discovery is that?" Amy gestured to the freed prisoners around them. Dozens of different species, all working together under human leadership. Creatures who had been enemies before were now cooperating because a human had shown them how. "You wanted to know what makes humans special," Amy said. "Here is your answer. We do not just survive. We do not just fight. We make other people better than they were before they met us." She walked over to the main communication console. "I am going to send a message to every Kithera ship in space. I am going to tell them that humans are under galactic protection, and that any ship that attacks Earth will face consequences from civilizations they have never heard of." Vextal's eyes went wide. "You cannot do that. Those civilizations do not exist." Amy smiled. "How do you know? Your people have explored maybe 5% of this galaxy. Are you willing to bet your entire civilization that the other 95% does not contain species that are much more dangerous than humans?" The High Examiner was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "What do you want from us?" "Simple," Amy said. "You are going to take every prisoner back to their home world safely. You are going to give them gifts of technology and knowledge as an apology. And you are going to spread the word to every species you meet that humans are friends, not enemies." And if we refuse? Amy looked around the command center. Her friends were operating Cathera technology like they had been born to it. The other freed prisoners were learning to work together in ways their captors had never imagined possible. Then I will teach every species in this galaxy how to work together the way I taught these prisoners. And when we are done learning from each other, we will come and have a much more serious conversation with your people. Vextal looked at the humans standing calmly in the middle of his ship, surrounded by alien allies, in complete control of Cathara technology. I think, he said slowly, that returning the prisoners safely would be the wisest course of action. 3 months later, Amy stood on the observation deck of the newly renamed ship UES Harmony, watching Earth grow larger in the viewscreen. The ship had been a gift from the Cathera, along with their most advanced technologies and a formal apology to the governments of Earth. Beside her stood representatives from a dozen different worlds, all of whom had asked to meet with Earth's leaders. The Cathera had kept their promise and spread word of human friendship across the galaxy. Captain Jake Miller, Amy's old commanding officer, stood beside her. The Defense Council wants to know how you did it, he said. How you convinced an entire alien civilization to change their ways without firing a shot. Amy watched Earth's blue oceans and white clouds fill the screen. I showed them something they had never seen before. What was that? Amy smiled. I showed them that the most powerful force in the universe is not weapons or technology or fear. It is the decision to help someone who cannot help themselves. Behind them, Zephyr's light pulsed in patterns that Amy had learned meant contentment. Thane was teaching human card games to a group of freed prisoners. Webb was showing Earth engineers how to improve their ship designs. Mist was working with Earth scientists to develop new forms of communication. What happens now? Jake asked. Amy looked out at the stars beyond Earth, thinking about all the worlds out there that might need help, all the species that might be alone and afraid, all the problems that might be solved by people working together instead of fighting each other. Now we get to work, she said. The galaxy is a big place and there are a lot of people who could use some friends. High Examiner Vextal, who had chosen to stay aboard as a cultural exchange representative, approached them. He had been watching the humans and their allies work together for months now, and his understanding of the universe had changed completely. I have a question, he said to Amy. What is it? When my people first captured you, we thought we were studying a primitive species to determine if you were a threat. But now I realize we had it backward. You were studying us? From the very beginning, you were learning everything you could about us so you could help us become better than we were. Amy nodded. That is what humans do. We see potential in people even when they cannot see it in themselves. Vextal was quiet for a moment. Your species is remarkable. Amy looked around at all her friends, human and alien, working together to build something better than any of them could have created alone. No, she said. We are just stubborn enough to believe that every problem has a solution, and patient enough to keep looking until we find it. As the UES Harmony entered Earth's orbit carrying us,